Hi students, this is Miss Johnson with 8-4, ax squared plus bx plus c. Our SWABAT for today is we are going to factor and solve equations that are in this form and equal 0. Alright, first vocabulary word is what is a quadratic equation? And a quadratic equation is equation with x squared, and when you graph it, it looks like a n or a u. It can be either way. Alright, example number 1 is we are going to factor the expression 7x squared plus 29x plus 4. Alright, step number 1 is we are not quite sure how to solve these or factor these when we have a coefficient in front of our x squared. So first thing we need to do is we need to find factors of the 7, the number in front of x squared, times the constant here. So we're going to find the factors of 7 times 4, which is 28. Okay, so we're going to need to find factors of 28 that add to the middle number. Alright, well, let's see. Numbers that multiply to 28 and add to 29, well, it's only one option, 28 and 1. So we're going to rewrite our problem with these factors and with an x. So we're going to have 28x squared, and instead of putting 29x, we're going to rewrite this as 28x plus 1x, because when we multiply them, we get 28, which comes from our 4 times the 7, but it adds to the middle number. Okay, and then keep the plus 4. Alright, now that we've done this, we have 4 terms, and just like we did in 8-2, we are going to group our common factors. So if I group the first 2, I know I can factor something out of that, and the second 2. Alright, well in the first term, I'm going to factor out the greatest common factor of 7x, and when I do that, I get x plus 4. And in this second set of parentheses, I can't factor anything out, so I'm just going to put my 1, and so it's going to stay x plus 4. And again, we're going to factor out the parentheses for step 5, and just a reminder, what's in parentheses should be the same. And then what's left goes in the other set of parentheses. So it's going to be x plus 4, and our other set of parentheses is 7x plus 1. Alright, that's how you factor an expression with a coefficient in front of x squared. Alright, example 2. This one is different because we have a negative here. Example 1 had all positives, but the steps are exactly the same. So we need to find the factors. Let's see, we're going to take 6 times negative 8. So we multiply those together to get negative 48. So we need to find factors of negative 48 that add to 22. Multiply to 48, add to 22, that's going to be positive 24 and negative 2. So I'm going to rewrite with those factors with the x. So the 6x squared stays the same. Instead of 22x, I'm going to put plus 24x plus negative 2x and keep the negative 8. Okay, step 3, group our common factors. And let's go ahead and factor out the GCF. So in the first set, I can factor out a 6x, which leaves me x plus 4. And in the second set of parentheses, I can factor out a negative 2, which leaves me with, again, x plus 4. So continuing step 5, to factor out what's in the parentheses, we get x plus 4 and 6x minus 2. Okay, just a reminder, you need to double check. Okay, you want to keep going, keep factoring if possible. And when we look here, 6x minus 2, they're both even numbers. So I can factor out a 2, and then we'd have 3x minus 1. And just mathematicians always bring the constant term, that 2, instead of leaving it in the middle, let's just bring it out front. So we would have 2 times the quantity of x plus 4 times 3x minus 1. Alrighty, now we're going to factor, for example 3, 4r squared minus r plus 7. Okay, just a reminder, if there's not that number there, it really has a 1, so it's minus 1r plus 7. Again, we're going to take the number in front of the r squared and our constant term, 4 times 7, multiply those together. So we need to find things that multiply to 28, but add to -1. That -1 in the middle. Let's see, multiply to 28, add to -1. Well, guess what? Sometimes you just can't find them. Factors of 28 are 7 and 4, that can't get me -1. -7, -4, that can't get me -1. 14 and 2, that doesn't work. 28 and 1, that doesn't work. So sometimes you just can't factor. So you can write prime. All right, real world example for example 4. Cheetahs, they're kind of fun. They pounce on an antelope that leaps with an initial velocity of 49 feet per second. How long is the cheetah in the air if it lands on the antelope's hind quarter? And that's going to be 3 feet from the ground. Well, I just want to point out that we have this general form of equations, okay, and it's h equals, and they always have this -16. And I talked to Mr. Von Roo, and he said that's because it's -16 feet per second when we're talking about gravity. So we've got -16 t squared plus vt, and v is the initial velocity, plus h sub 0, and that is the initial height. Okay, so what we're going to do is we need to first of all take this equation and we're going to substitute our information from the problem. So h is the height that it's going to reach, while our antelope reaches 3 feet from the ground. So our height is going to be 3 feet. We've got our -16 t squared plus v is our initial velocity, and says our initial velocity is 49 feet, so 49t plus 0, our initial height. Well, let's think about that a little bit. If the cheetah is jumping, where's it jumping from? Well, it's jumping from the ground, which has an initial height of 0. Okay, so we're going to have 49 plus 0. Once we have our equation set up, in order to solve these problems, remember we have to have one side equal to 0. So we're going to subtract the 3, move it over to the other side, so that our left side is equal to 0. Now that we have it equal to 0, when we have been working with all of these problems, we need to make sure that our x squared or our t squared, we need to make sure that that is positive. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to multiply everything by -1 to change the signs. So we've got 0 equals 16t squared minus 49t plus 3. Now we have everything set up and we are going to factor. So we've got 16 and 3, so we need to do 16 times 3, which is 48. So we need to find factors of 48 that add to -49. Well, the only one that I can think of is -48 and -1. So we're going to rewrite with those factors. So 16t squared minus 48t minus 1t plus 3. Okay, go ahead and group them. And let's go ahead and factor. Let's see, first term I can factor out a 16t, so we'll be left with t minus 3. And looking ahead, I know that I need to have a -3, so I'm going to factor out a -1 out of the second set of parentheses. And then I'll be left with t minus 3. Factoring some more, t minus 3, factoring out what's in parentheses, and what's left is 16t minus 1. And our final step is to solve. And since we have one side equal to 0, we take each set of parentheses, set it equal to 0. So 0 equals t minus 3. Add 3 to both sides. And we get t equals 3 seconds. Or, okay, we take the 16t minus 1. We're going to add 1 and then divide by 16 because that's with the t. So it's going to be 1/16. So it either takes the cheetah 3 seconds or it takes 1/16 of a second to pounce on an antelope. Pretty cool. All right, summary. Feel free to do in your notes on a summary sheet tomorrow or in a foldable study guide. This was Miss Johnson with 8-4, Factoring and Solve ax² + bx + c equations. Thanks.